The woman set down a blue box and said, "You'll need this tonight." I didn't have time to ask anything. She disappeared. I slipped the box into my bag and went home. When I finally opened it, I screamed in terror. Before I go on, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which city you're listening from. Sometimes it feels like sharing things like this makes it a little easier to breathe. The cafe smelled of cinnamon and slightly burnt coffee beans. I'd grown to love that smell. It felt almost like a ritual. Outside the window stretched a typical Westchester fall. Gray sky, wet asphalt, yellow and red leaves along the roadside, only a few cars on the highway. The world seemed to slow down a bit, as if giving itself a break. Timothy and Diana were sitting across from me, their voices getting lost in the general clatter of dishes and conversations. "Mom, you really should think about selling the property," Diana said, absently stirring her latte. Her manicure was perfect, as always. Her nails tapped softly against the mug. "It's too much land for one person." I forced a smile. I'd learned how to do that well over the past year. "I'm managing for now, sweetheart." Timothy shifted in his chair and looked away. At 42, he'd inherited his father's broad shoulders, but not his strength of character. "Mom," he began. "Diana just means we're worried. There's the house, the fields, the forest. It's a lot for one person." "Michael and I handled it for 37 years, I said quietly. "I think I can manage a little longer." The conversation died instantly. It always did as soon as I mentioned Michael. My husband, who had been officially listed as dead for almost a year. Almost, because we buried an empty grave. His car was found last fall in Eagle Lake. They pulled it out of the water. The driver's door was open, but there was no body. For 3 weeks they searched the lake, the shore, the forest. Then they shrugged. "Strong currents," the police said. "It happens. Sometimes bodies aren't found." And I had to stand over an empty coffin at Maple Hill Cemetery and pretend I was saying goodbye. "We should ask for the check," Diana said sharply, standing up. She always did that when the conversation got uncomfortable. "Tim, let's go." I watched their backs as they walked to the counter, leaning toward each other, whispering. Lately, they did that a lot. Talked about me, thinking I couldn't hear. At 64, I suddenly learned that to people, a widow is like a crystal vase. They put you on a shelf, dust you off, pat your shoulder, and constantly wait for you to shatter. I was already reaching for my bag to get my wallet when I noticed her. The woman appeared by my table so suddenly that I flinched and knocked over my glass of water. It splashed across the table. She was around 50. Steel gray hair pulled tightly into a bun, a severe face, eyes that seemed to see right through you, a dark coat, despite the unusually warm autumn day, and in her hands, only a small blue box. "Mrs. Smith," she said. Not a question, a statement. "Yes," I answered, feeling my heart start to race for no clear reason. She carefully placed the box on the table between us. I noticed her fingers were slightly trembling. "You'll need this tonight." "I'm sorry, what? I don't understand." At 11:15. Her voice dropped to an almost whisper, rushed and frightened. "When it rings, pick up. And Mrs. Smith, don't trust anyone." I opened my mouth to ask at least something, who she was, how she knew me, what all this meant. But the woman had already turned and was walking quickly toward the exit. I stood up, but she literally dissolved into the stream of people outside, as if she'd never been there. The blue box was still lying on the table, looking harmless enough, but just looking at it sent chills down my spine. I glanced toward the counter. Timothy and Diana were still there. Diana was showing something on her phone to the cashier. The cashier was counting change. No one had noticed a thing. It felt like my hand was acting on its own. I grabbed the box, shoved it to the bottom of my bag, covered it with a scarf, my wallet, the receipt. And at that exact moment, they turned around. "Mom, ready to go?" Timothy asked. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded surprisingly steady. Let's go. I remember the drive home like it was through fog. They talked about real estate prices, new developments, how comfortable city life is in retirement, while all I could think about was the blue box, as if it were burning a hole through my leather bag. Who was that woman? How did she know my last name? And what could she have given me that I'd need at night? They dropped me off at the start of the long dirt road leading to our house, as always. Politely declined to come in for tea. I watched their black SUV drive away, red taillights slowly fading into the dusk, and only then allowed myself to take a deep breath. The house stood ahead, painfully familiar. 2 stories, light siding, green shutters that Michael and I had painted together just 5 years ago. To the left, the old barn, once red, now faded. And beyond that, our 40 acres, fields, a patch of forest, a low area with a stream. I used to love this place. Lately, I often felt like I was living in a mausoleum. When I went inside, the first thing I did was lock the door. Before my husband's disappearance, I rarely did that. But after the lake incident, a lot had changed. I went straight to the kitchen, set my bag on the oak table, took out the box. It made a soft thud against the tabletop. For a minute, I just sat there, staring at it, feeling my hands shake. Then I finally forced myself to lift the lid. It opened easily. Inside, wrapped in white tissue paper, was a phone. Not just any phone. Michael's phone. I recognized it instantly. The worn case with his college sticker, the small crack in the corner. The one he'd had ever since he dropped it off the barn roof 2 years ago while fixing it. The police said they never found the phone. Probably sank with the car, they said. Water, depth, current. And now it was lying on my kitchen table. Delivered by a stranger who knew my name and the exact time it would ring. My fingers felt numb as I picked up the phone. The screen was black, lifeless. I pressed the power button, not really believing anything would happen. The phone vibrated briefly, the screen lit up. Full battery, 1 bar of signal. The lock screen photo, the same one from a year ago. Michael and me at our 40th wedding anniversary. He has his arm around my shoulders, laughing, and I'm laughing too, turned toward our granddaughter, who had just said something ridiculous. My eyes burned, everything blurred. It was impossible. The phone had been missing for a year. The police looked for it. I looked for it. Went through every cabinet, pocket, drawer. Nothing. And now it just appeared, handed to me in a café by a stranger. I opened the recent calls. Empty. Messages. Empty. Everything wiped clean, except for that single photo on the lock screen. One lonely ghost of the past. The kitchen clock read 6:47 p.m. At 11:15, the woman had said, pick up when it rings. 4.5 hours of waiting. 4.5 hours sitting next to this impossible object and wondering if I was losing my mind. I put the kettle on, made myself chamomile tea, the kind Michael always teased me about. Grass in boiling water again. I didn't even drink it, just held the mug, warming my hands, watching the steam rise. The phone lay on the table like an unexploded bomb. At 7:30, I tried calling Timothy. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What could I say? Son, someone just brought me your father's phone, the one that's been missing for a year. He already treated me like something fragile. After that, he'd decide it was time to put me in a nursing home. At 8:15, I walked through the house, checking the locks. What I was doing felt like a parody of paranoia, but the words kept echoing in my head. Don't trust anyone. At 9, I took out the folder with Michael's case files, the papers they gave me after the official investigation. I'd read them so many times I almost knew them by heart, but I spread them out on the table anyway. The accident diagram, the fisherman's statement about seeing the car go into the lake, the diver's notes, the search plan. Everything pointed to one thing, an accident. Slippery road, sharp turn, 1 second of inattention. except Michael had driven that road his entire life, knew every turn, every bump, and he was the most careful driver I'd ever known, sometimes to the point of irritation. A little after 10, I was back in the kitchen, just staring at the phone. At 10:30, I started pacing from one corner of the kitchen to the other. At 11, I forced myself to sit down and breathe evenly. The clock hands crawled toward 11:15 so slowly, it felt like mockery. Every minute dragged on like an hour. Part of me wanted to grab the phone and throw it into a bucket of water, the trash, the stove, anywhere, just so I wouldn't hear it ring. But another part of me, the part that never fully believed Michael had simply drowned, clung to the hope of learning something. Anything. At 11:14, I watched the second hand approach 12. Exactly at 11:15 p.m., the phone rang. A sharp sound sliced through the silence of the kitchen. Michael's old ringtone, the same song he'd set back in the early 2000s and never changed, only transferred to each newer phone. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone onto the table. It rang a second time. On the screen, an unknown number. On the third ring, I finally hit the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello," my voice cracked. Silence. Not dead silence, no. I could clearly hear someone breathing, steady, quiet. "Hello," I said again, louder. "Who is this?" Another pause, and then a voice came through. Low, slightly distorted, like it was running through some electronic filter, but painfully familiar. "Christine," the voice said. "Don't believe Timothy. Don't believe Diana. Don't believe the police. You're in danger." The line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Thoughts crashed over me in waves, knocking the breath out of my lungs. That strange, altered voice sounded exactly like my husband, Michael Smith, who had been considered dead for almost a year and whose empty cross stood in the cemetery. My dead husband had just called me and warned me that I was in danger. That night, I didn't sleep. How could I? I sat at the kitchen table until the first pale streaks of dawn, staring at the phone and repeating to myself, "Don't believe Timothy. Don't believe Diana. Don't believe the police. You're in danger." By morning, I already knew I wasn't going to sleep. How could you, when your dead husband calls in the middle of the night, or someone who sounds exactly like him and knows things no one else should know? I stayed at the kitchen table all the way until sunrise. Outside, our fields turned gray with early light, the eastern side of the sky already brightening, birds starting to call to each other in the woods. The phone lay in front of me like a piece of evidence I had no idea what to do with. Don't believe Timothy. Don't believe Diana. Don't believe the police. You're in danger. By 6 a.m., I finally made a decision. I couldn't go to the police. The voice had said, "Don't believe them." And I definitely couldn't explain anything to Timothy, so that meant I was on my own. But being alone didn't mean I was helpless. Michael and I ran this place for almost 40 years, took out loans for equipment, fought with officials, signed contracts, argued with lawyers and bankers. I handled the bookkeeping myself, calculated taxes, read every paper down to the last footnote. I knew how to dig up information. I knew how to ask questions. I'd just gotten used to making every decision as a team. Now I'd have to do it alone. The first thing I did was take Michael's phone in my hands and look at it not like a miracle, but like an object. In the morning light, I noticed what I hadn't seen at night. Battery, 100%. The screen was bright, no sign of the old dying battery. After a year in a lake and no charging, there wouldn't be anything left of that phone, which meant someone had been charging it all this time, keeping it alive, waiting for the right moment. In the settings, the number was still listed as Michael's old one, the same number they'd supposedly shut down after the crash, and yet last night someone had been able to call it. I opened the call log again, empty, as if the night call had never happened, but it had. I remembered the breathing. I remembered the way my name sounded. I was already digging through the photo gallery when I heard a car coming up the gravel road toward the house. Over the years, I'd learned to recognize the sound of tires on stone. My heart dropped. Automatically, I shoved Michael's phone into the pocket of my sweatshirt and went to the window. Timothy's SUV rolled slowly into the yard. At 8:15 a.m., he never came that early without calling first. I forced myself to exhale and went to the door. Timothy got out alone. In his hands was a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. "Morning, Mom," he called, way too upbeat. "Brought you breakfast. Hope you haven't eaten yet." "Unexpected," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Diana isn't with you?" "She has yoga." He waved it off, climbing the porch steps. "And I wanted to talk to you. Just the 2 of us." A chill ran down my back. Just the 2 of us sounded way too deliberate. We sat in the living room. I carefully set my cup on the coffee table. The coffee was from that expensive café downtown I never let myself go to. Timothy only brought me coffee like that when he wanted something. He looked around the room like he was calculating what every item was worth. "Mom, I need to be honest with you," he started, setting his cup on the edge of the table. "Diana and I are really worried." "About what exactly?" I asked. "About me? The house? The land?" He made a vague gesture. "Everything. After Dad, you changed. You shut down. And we think it's hard for you here alone, so far away from everyone." I took a small sip, just to buy time. Hot, good, with real flavor, not the instant coffee I drank at home. "I'm managing," I said. "I'm not sure you are." Timothy leaned forward, pretending it was sincere, kind. "Diana and I did the math. Taxes, utilities, repairs, groceries. It's draining you. If you sell the farm and move into the city, we can find you a nice assisted living place or an apartment in a good senior building. Doctors, people your age." "I'm 64, Timothy, not 90, I reminded him. "I know," he said quickly, "but you can see it yourself. Big house, the lots, the barn, the equipment, everything's falling apart. And the land, the house, that's a gold mine. If you sell, you'll have money. You'll live peacefully and won't have to worry about anything." And there it was, the real reason for the early visit. "The Smith farm isn't for sale," I said, sharper than I meant to. Timothy's jaw twitched. "Mom, be reasonable. You can't carry all this alone. The fields are getting overgrown, the barn's collapsing, winter's coming. What are you going to do if the pipes freeze or the boiler breaks?" "The same thing your father and I did for 37 years, I said. "Fix it." "Dad's gone," he snapped, harsher than he probably intended. Then he caught himself and softened his tone. "Sorry. I just want you to think practically. It's valuable land, Mom. We could get really good money for it, especially now, with everyone buying up land outside the city for new developments." "We?" I repeated slowly. "For it." He looked away. "There's a company," he said at last. "Summit Holdings. 2 weeks ago they reached out to Diana's firm. They're looking for land in our area for development." "And you've already talked to them?" "It's just preliminary." He hesitated. "But Mom, they're offering serious money. Numbers you've never seen in your life. No worries for the rest of your life." I set my cup down very carefully. "Let me make something clear, Timothy." I looked him straight in the eye. "This land fed 3 generations of Smiths. Your grandfather built this house with his own hands. Your father and I raised you here, and I'm not handing all of it over for cottages so some businessmen can flatten our fields with bulldozers." "You're just reacting emotionally," he said with a grimace. "And I'm being loyal to my husband like a human being," I answered quietly. Something flickered across Timothy's face. Guilt, maybe, or anger. "Dad is dead, Mom. He's been gone almost a year. You can't keep living like he's going to walk through that door any minute." Michael's phone in my pocket felt like it burned through the fabric. If you only knew, I thought. "I think you should go," I said calmly. He stood up sharply, his movements stiff and abrupt. Fine. But think about what I said. Really think. Because Diana and I... He paused. We're not just going to sit back and watch you run yourself, and this whole place, into the ground. There was something in his voice that made goosebumps rise on my arms. A slight but very clear threat, wrapped in concern. What was that? I asked. It means we love you, and we're going to do what's best for you, whether you like it or not. He left, slamming the door a little harder than necessary. I went to the window. Timothy sat in his car for a long time before driving off, talking on the phone, and the look on his face made it clear the conversation wasn't pleasant. My hands were still shaking. I pulled Michael's phone out of my pocket and stared at it. Don't believe Timothy, the voice had said. Timothy had just tried to talk me into selling the land, mentioned some company, acted like he already considered the property his. What was going on? I didn't need guesses. I needed paperwork, numbers, something you couldn't sweet-talk or twist. I went into Michael's office. To everyone else it was my office now, but in my heart, it was still his. I opened the metal filing cabinet where we kept everything important. The deed, insurance policies, bank documents, Michael's will. I laid it all out on the desk and started reading again, with different eyes, like I wasn't a widow but a lawyer brought in from the outside. The will was simple and clear, everything to me, and after my death, one heir, Timothy. Nothing unusual. I picked up the deed to the land. The farm was registered to Michael and me together, just like it had been for years. But at the bottom, in tiny print, I saw a note I'd never noticed before. A date, 2 months before the crash. A request for a survey, a boundary update. Someone had ordered a land survey last fall. I turned on the laptop and opened our shared family email account. Old-fashioned to most people, one email address for the two of us, for all bills and contracts, but it worked for us. Everything in one place. I typed survey, then property, then the company name Timothy had mentioned, Summit. 3 emails popped up. The first was from a surveying company confirming an on-site visit in mid-September. The second was a paid invoice for their services. The third was an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, regarding the Smith property, preliminary valuation. I opened it, feeling my fingers go numb. Dear Mr. Smith, thank you for reaching out regarding the possible sale of your land. Based on the survey results and the current market, our company is prepared to consider an initial offer in the range of $1.8 to $2.2 million for the full 40 acres, pending further review and zoning approvals. As discussed, we will require certain assurances of family consent before moving forward. Please let us know the timeline in which you can arrange the necessary agreements. Sincerely, Director of Acquisitions, Summit Holdings, Bruce Pembroke. The date on the email, late September, 6 weeks before Michael's car was pulled from Eagle Lake. My husband had been negotiating the sale of our land, quietly, without me. I leaned back in my chair. One thought hammered in my head. No, it can't be. This has to be a mistake. Michael couldn't have done that. We always decided everything together. Always. He knew how important this land was to me, how I clung to it when my mother died, how I said the house and the fields were what kept me standing. If he really planned to sell it all to Summit Holdings, why didn't he say a single word? My own phone pinged. A message from Diana. Christine, good afternoon. Tim said you were upset this morning. Is everything okay? We're always here if you need help. Diana. The timestamp, neatly 1 hour after Timothy had left. Too perfect, like she'd been standing right behind him while he talked to me. I didn't open the message. I just turned off the screen. Instead, I picked up Michael's phone again. I needed to check one more thing, his email. Maybe there were messages on his phone that weren't in our shared inbox. I opened the app, and it asked for a password. I tried our wedding date. Wrong. The house address, wrong. Timothy's birthday, still no. I was running through every possible option in my head when someone knocked loudly at the door. I didn't hear the doorbell. Ours is old and quiet, and my thoughts were a mile away. I snapped the laptop shut, shoved both phones into my pocket, and went to the hallway. On the porch stood a man around 45, wearing a sporty blazer over jeans. He held up a leather badge. "Mrs. Christine Smith?" he asked. "I'm Senior Detective Boris Wilkins, County Division. Can I speak with you?" My throat went dry. "About what?" "About your husband's death." His voice was gentle, even sympathetic. "We've gotten new information and we need to ask you a few questions. May I come in?" Refusing would immediately look suspicious, and the last thing I needed right now was the police getting suspicious, especially when I didn't fully understand what was happening myself. "Of course." I heard my own voice as if it belonged to someone else, and I stepped aside to let him in. We sat in the living room. He took out a small notepad. He looked calm and approachable, the way people who ask questions for a living are supposed to look. It had the opposite effect on me. I tensed up even more. "I'm sorry to make you relive all this," he began. "I understand how hard it is, but we're reviewing some older cases, and something came up in the Eagle Lake crash." "What?" I asked. "A witness has come forward," Wilkins said. "Someone who was nearby that night. He claims he saw another vehicle, possibly following your husband's car." My heart started beating faster. "Following him? That's what he says?" "We're still verifying it, but it does raise questions about the earlier conclusion that it was an accident." He paused. "Tell me, did your husband have any problems recently? Financial, work-related, conflict with anyone? Did anyone threaten him?" Summit Holdings, the survey, secret emails, big numbers, the offer to sell the land. Everything flared in my mind at once. "No," I said. "No problems." The lie came out easily, too easily. Instinct. Because if I said out loud that Michael had been secretly trying to sell the property to some holding company, it would open too many doors. And I still didn't know what was behind them. "Did you notice anything strange lately?" he pressed. "Unusual calls? People asking about your husband? Questions about the land?" The blue box, the night call, the voice in my ear. "No," I repeated. "Nothing like that." Wilkins watched me for a moment. His eyes weren't as kind as they'd been at the door. Now they were sharp, focused. "Mrs. Smith," he said quietly, "if you're holding anything back, now is the time to say it. If your husband's death wasn't an accident, if someone harmed him, you could be in danger too." The exact same words I'd heard in that night call. "You're in danger." "I understand," I said, "but I have nothing to add." He nodded, took out a business card, and placed it on the table. "If you remember anything, or something unusual happens, call me anytime. We take things like this seriously." When he left, I locked the door, every lock, and for a moment, I just stood there with my back against the wall, trying to breathe. My legs felt like rubber. A new witness. Another car. Maybe the crash wasn't an accident. And someone, Timothy, Diana, the police, all of them, was clearly not telling me the full truth about that night. Slowly, I went back into the office. I pulled Michael's phone from my pocket and examined it again, this time carefully, almost by touch. My fingers slid along the edge of the case, and I felt something thin wedged between the phone body and the plastic. Carefully, I hooked it with my nail and pulled. A tiny folded slip of paper fell out, so small and thin it would have been easy to miss. I unfolded it, trying not to tear it. In Michael's familiar, neat handwriting were only 4 words. "The truth is buried. Look." I stared at those words until the lines blurred in front of my eyes. Buried where? What did he mean by the truth? Was it a metaphor or something literal? Earth, a hole, a grave, a hiding place. And suddenly I understood very clearly. I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I needed real help. But who could I trust if it was, don't believe Timothy, don't believe Diana, and don't believe the police? And that's when I remembered the one person who had always been on my side and had no interest in our land at all. The first thing I did was pick up my regular phone. The only person I thought of in that moment was Sandra, Michael's sister. She lived in Chicago and, in all these years, had never once tried to claim a single inch of our land or interfere in our affairs. I dialed her number. She answered almost immediately. "Chris, did something happen? You don't usually call in the morning." I tried to keep my voice calm. "Sandy, hi. Listen, could you come stay with me for a couple of days?" "Of course." She paused. "But you didn't even ask if it works for me. That means it's bad. What's going on? And don't tell me it's nothing. You're breathing in a way that's making me nervous." I clenched my teeth. I couldn't tell her the truth over the phone. After the night call, I wasn't even sure who might be listening or what could be unsafe to say. "I can't explain right now," I forced out. "I just need you here. Please." There was a pause on the other end. Sandra had always been too good at sensing things. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll buy a bus ticket in the morning and be with you by evening. Hang in there, you hear me? If it gets really bad, call me right away." "Thank you, Sandy." I hung up and realized I already felt a little lighter. Not today, then tomorrow. I wouldn't be alone anymore. But there was still a full day until the next evening, and I couldn't just sit and wait. I took the folded scrap of paper out of my pocket again. The truth is buried. Look, I'd lived with this man for 40 years. I knew his habits like my own. If Michael had buried something, it could be anywhere. And if he wrote, "Look," it meant he believed that sooner or later I'd figure it out. I spent the rest of the day searching. I went through the house from top to bottom. The attic, the basement, closets, his old workshop where boxes of tools still stood untouched. In the barn, I dug through old crates, checked for false walls, double boards. I tried to remember every hiding place he'd ever used, where he used to stash money or hide surprises for the grandkids. Nothing. Just cobwebs, splinters, old metal scraps, and my aching knees. By evening, I could barely stay on my feet. I made myself some soup from whatever I had, ate without appetite, more out of habit than hunger. I was standing at the sink, washing a plate, when Michael's phone rang. I jumped so hard the plate almost slipped from my hands. I wiped my hands on a towel and grabbed the phone. On the screen, an unknown number again. "Hello?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The same voice, distorted, like through a bad filter, but painfully familiar. "Did you find the note?" "I did," I breathed out. "But what does it mean? The truth is buried. Where? What am I even supposed to be looking for?" "Not where, when," the voice said. "Think about what happened exactly 1 year before the crash." I stared at a spot on the wall. A year earlier. Yes, we were just living. The house, the farm, the grandkids visiting, nothing special. "Think," he insisted. "November 2022. What changed then?" I ran through days and weeks in my head. Ordinary worries blended into one gray strip, and then one thing surfaced. "Michael," I said slowly. "That's when he went to New York. For 3 days, supposedly on business." "Not supposedly," the voice said. "It was a business trip. He met with a criminal defense lawyer. His name is Stuart Cooper." I sank into a chair, like my bones had been pulled out of me. Why would Michael need a lawyer like that? "Because he discovered something," the voice replied. "And it put him in danger. He was trying to understand what to do and how to protect you." "What did he discover?" I asked. "Just say it." "I can't." The voice wavered slightly. "Not over the phone. But you need to find Cooper. He has everything, documents, recordings, everything Michael managed to gather." A pause. "Before he was killed." A chill ran down my spine. Who killed him? I whispered. The same people who are pressuring you now to sell the land, the voice said. The same people who will profit from your death. The line went dead. I sat there, gripping that someone else's, yet strangely familiar phone, feeling something collapse inside me. Timothy? Diana? My own son among those who would benefit from my death? My mind slammed into that thought like a wall. Timothy could be weak, spineless, greedy, anything, but a killer? And yet, secret negotiations to sell the land, the survey, emails from Summit Holdings, his words, "We won't just watch you run yourself and this place into the ground." I went to the laptop, opened the browser, and typed, "Stuart Cooper, lawyer, New York, criminal defense." The website came up immediately. A solid firm, high-profile cases, clients who clearly had a lot to lose. This wasn't a lawyer who handled small things. I looked at Michael's phone, at the note that said, "The truth is buried. Look." Then back at the screen with the New York office number. I dialed. "Stuart Cooper Law Offices. Hello?" A woman's voice answered. "Hello." I swallowed. "I need to speak with Mr. Cooper regarding my husband, Michael Smith." A brief pause. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Cooper does not discuss client matters with relatives without the client's direct consent," the receptionist said politely. "My husband is no longer alive," I said. "He died a year ago, and I believe his death is connected to why he came to you. My life is in danger." The silence stretched longer. "Please stay on the line." Neutral, slippery music came on. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear it. Finally, a male voice came through, slightly muffled, confident. "Mrs. Smith." "This is Stuart Cooper." "Hello," I whispered. "So Michael really did?" "Yes," he cut in shortly. "Your husband was my client, and I'm very sorry about how everything ended. I saw the news." "Then you know why he came to you," I said. "Please, tell me something. Anything." "You understand," his voice turned dry, professional, "that attorney-client privilege remains even after a client's death." "Yes, but my husband may have been killed because of what you know," I interrupted. "And now it seems they want to get rid of me too. Don't I have the right to know what he got himself into?" There was another pause, and I clearly heard his quiet exhale. "Not over the phone," he said at last. "I won't discuss something like this on a standard line. Can you come to New York?" "When?" "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. My office. You'll find the address on the website. Come alone. And, Mrs. Smith, don't tell anyone you're coming to see me. That's important for your safety." He hung up without waiting for my answer. I sat for a while with the phone still in my hand, listening to the dial tone. Then I opened the bus schedule page and started looking for a morning route to New York. I found one and bought the ticket online. I wrote down the bus number and departure time on a piece of paper, just so I wouldn't rely on my memory alone. I was almost calming down, knowing I finally had some kind of plan, when I heard another engine outside. I went to the window and looked out. Diana's car was pulling into the yard, alone, without Timothy. That alone was strange. Diana had never come onto our property by herself, always at least with Timothy. He was like a living shield for her, a buffer between us. I opened the door before she had a chance to knock. "Diana," I said, "I wasn't expecting you." She smiled a smile that gave off no warmth at all. She was wearing her usual office armor, a strict suit, heels, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face even more. "Good afternoon, Christine," she said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "I won't stay long. I wanted to talk about this morning." "Timothy already said everything," I replied. "I think your position was made quite clear." "I'm not sure," she said calmly. "Tim can be a bit soft with wording, and this issue is too serious for that." We went into the living room. I noticed how her eyes slid over the space, walls, furniture, family photos, shelves, evaluating. like a real estate agent already calculating square footage in dollars. Timothy told me you got upset when he mentioned selling, Diana began. I understand this place is more than just a house to you, but we need to face reality. I am, I said. Your reality is getting rid of your aging mother-in-law and grabbing a very desirable piece of land. That's unfair, she frowned slightly. I care about you, as someone close to me. About my money, yes, I corrected dryly. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through something. Christine, she said in a more official tone. I'm a lawyer, as you know, and when I saw you living alone in a huge house, on expensive land, far from medical care and basic services, I asked Timothy to show me your financial situation. So you went through our accounts, I said, feeling anger rise. As your daughter-in-law and the person who would be responsible for you if something happened to you, I had the right, she replied evenly. And what I saw there worried me greatly. And what exactly did you see? You're burning through your savings too fast, Diana said calmly. At this rate, in a year and a half, you'll have nothing left, and that's without any major breakdowns or illness. I stayed silent. And that's not all, she continued. A colleague and I reviewed the transactions from the year before Michael's death. There are some very strange movements, large cash withdrawals, transfers to unclear companies, almost as if he was hiding money. She looked up. The tax authorities might be interested in that. This was no longer concern. It was a threat, carefully wrapped in legal language. Out, I said quietly. Please leave my house. I'm trying to help you. Diana stood up, smoothing her skirt as if brushing off invisible dust. If you agreed to sell the land, none of these problems would exist. You'd live in a good place, under medical supervision, with proper conditions. We'd take care of the tax issues and Michael's strange transactions. You'd live calmly, the way someone your age should. So somewhere it's easier for you to control me, I clarified. I mean, somewhere it would be safer for you. Her voice hardened. This is a large property, Christine. Lots of secluded places. The barn, the woods, the old well behind the north field. Accidents happen on farms all the time, especially to elderly people who live alone. The room seemed to tilt. Are you threatening me right now? I asked. Of course not, she said, and the smile made it clear that of course she was. I sympathize with you and worry about you. She was already heading for the door when she stopped and added one more thing. We consulted a guardianship lawyer. Do you know that under our laws, relatives can petition the court to declare an elderly person legally incompetent if they're unable to make reasonable decisions? It's a form of protection, so they can't be taken advantage of. Everything inside me went cold. You wouldn't dare, I said. We would, she replied calmly. If we see that you're deliberately harming yourself, refusing help, behaving irrationally. That empty smile again. Think about what's best for everyone, Christine. We're giving you a week to reconsider. After that, we'll look at other options. She left. Her heels clicked sharply across the porch. I closed the door, barely stopping myself from slamming it. They were going to put me under guardianship, take away my right to decide for myself, my house, my land. Officially turn me into someone helpless. And from there, an accident wouldn't be far. I went back to the office, turned on the laptop again, and opened the bank statements from the past 2 years. The large cash withdrawals Diana mentioned were all there. $5,000, $8,500, $12,000, all within 6 months before the crash. All in cash, no recipient listed, and they stopped exactly 1 week before Michael's car went into Eagle Lake. This wasn't hiding money. These were payments. To someone, for something that couldn't be done officially, for information, for protection, for a lawyer's work. My regular phone pinged again. A message from Timothy. Mom, Diana said you took everything the wrong way again. Please don't make this harder. We really want what's best for you. We love you. I deleted the message without opening the thread. Then I went upstairs, pulled a small suitcase out of the closet, and started packing for the bus trip. Underwear, a warm sweater, documents, some cash, a few pills just in case. It was already dark outside. Night was coming on. I was just zipping up the suitcase when I heard footsteps on the porch. Unhurried, but heavy. Slow, like the person already knew they would be heard. I went to the bedroom window and carefully pulled the curtain aside. On the porch, half hidden by darkness, stood a figure. I couldn't see the face, hood, shadow, but the posture, the way he stood, hands in his pockets, weight on one leg. Something inside me dropped. That was how Michael stood, all his life. The figure raised a hand and gave a slight wave, a short, familiar gesture, like a greeting, then slowly turned and pointed toward the barn, stood there for another second, and disappeared into the darkness. My chin started to tremble. Michael's phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Barn, midnight. Come alone. Don't trust anyone else. I looked at the clock. 13 minutes to midnight. I had 12 minutes to decide whether I had completely lost my mind, or whether I was going to step into the darkness to face whatever was waiting for me there. I stood by the window, staring at the dark yard, at the black outline of the barn I knew with my eyes closed, and I understood. If I didn't go now, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. I was scared to the point of nausea, but doing nothing was even scarier. At 11:58 p.m., I went downstairs. I grabbed a small flashlight from the table, the one I kept by my bed in case the power went out. I stopped by the door. I need protection, I told myself. I'd never owned a weapon. Long ago, Michael had a hunting rifle, but he sold it when Timothy left for college. He said he didn't want unnecessary weapons in the house. In the utility closet, I found a hammer, an adjustable wrench, a heavy screwdriver. I held the hammer in my hands, imagined striking someone's head, and felt sick. Instead, I took my regular phone, turned on the voice recorder, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. At least something would remain if. At 11:59 p.m., I stepped outside. Cold November air hit my face, cutting straight to the bone. I'd thrown my jacket on in a hurry and forgotten my hat, but I didn't go back. The barn was only 30 or 40 meters away. I'd walked there thousands of times in my life. Night, day, snowstorms, rain. I'd never once been afraid of that place. Tonight, every step felt like a mistake. The gravel crunched under my feet. The darkness around me was thick and heavy. The flashlight picked out fragments of the yard, the fence, the corner of the house, the old cart by the barn wall. The barn door was slightly open. That was already wrong. I always kept it closed, from strangers, dogs, and nosy neighborhood kids. A soft light spilled through the gap. Not electric, not our old bulb under the ceiling, but warmer, yellow, like from a camping lantern. "Hello?" I called quietly, surprised at how hoarse my voice sounded. No answer. I pushed the door. It creaked like in every low-budget horror movie and opened wider. Inside, everything looked the same as always. Shelves along the wall, old machinery in the corner, a pile of boards, Michael's tools neatly laid out on the workbench. Only the broken tractor stood in the middle, and a small battery-powered lantern burned on the bench, casting long shadows. And next to the bench stood a man. At first, in the harsh light, I saw only a silhouette. Height, broad shoulders, a familiar stance, hands behind his back, head slightly lowered. "Michael?" slipped out of me. The silhouette stepped forward, out of the shadow. It wasn't Michael, but the resemblance was so strong it made my skin prickle. Around 50, maybe a little older. The same shoulders, the same type of face, just harder features, weathered skin, a thin scar on the left cheekbone, heavy gray eyes. "Who are you?" I asked, anger suddenly pushing the fear aside. "And why are you playing these games with me?" "My name is David Hawkins," he answered in a rough voice. And I'm here because your husband asked me to be. My husband is dead, I said. Almost a year now. I know. He nodded. I was in that second car the detective mentioned to you today. My knees buckled, and I grabbed an old crate for support. So it was you? You caught up to him? Forced him off the road? No, he said sharply. I was trying to cover him. He reached into his inner pocket, pulled out a leather badge holder, and opened it. Inside, an emblem, seals, a laminated ID. DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, he said. Agent David Hawkins. I stared at the badge, trying to force all of this into something that made sense. What does my husband have to do with this? I finally asked. Everything. David stepped closer and placed the badge on the workbench so I could see it clearly. 2 years ago, he came to us. Said something very strange was happening on his land. Strange? I echoed. On your property, under the north field, near the old stone fence, he said calmly. There's a natural cave system, and someone has been using it as a storage site. I blinked. What cave? We've lived there 40 years. I've never heard of any cave. Your son has, David said quietly. He found the entrance about 5 years ago. At his words, something cold slowly slid down my spine. And what was he doing there? My voice broke. David took several photographs from a folder lying on the bench and spread them out in front of me. The first showed a forest at night, greenish, like in a special ops movie. Men in hoodies carrying crates. The second, a stone wall, a gap between boulders, a black opening. On the third, I froze. Timothy and Diana stood in a parking lot near some shopping center, talking to an unfamiliar man. Timothy was handing him an envelope. This is fake, I forced out. I wish it were, David replied tiredly. For 5 years, your son has been renting out that cave as a storage site. Shipments of drugs are brought in, kept there for a while, then distributed across the county and beyond. He gets a cut. I listened, feeling like I was being cut apart from the inside. Timothy wouldn't, I started. He's not alone, David continued, as if he hadn't heard me. Diana organized everything. She found the connections, routed things through her legal firms, introduced the right people. Her clients aren't exactly saints. He looked at me again, more gently. I know how this sounds, but your husband didn't see it once or twice. He started watching, taking photos, writing down license plates, documenting meetings. And he came to you, I whispered. Yes, to me and to Janet Hogan, he nodded. Janet was his handler. I was field support. We gathered evidence for 1.5 years. Michael did everything he could. He was very careful, but, I asked. Someone burned us, David said bluntly. Most likely someone in local law enforcement. Maybe Wilkins. Maybe someone higher up. They found out Michael was cooperating with us. My breath caught. So the crash... It wasn't a crash, he said. That night, I was driving behind him, at a distance, so I wouldn't spook anyone who might be tailing him. Right before the turn to the lake, another car shot out from a forest road and forced him toward the shoulder. Michael went into the ditch. After that, you know the rest. He ran a hand over his face, as if pushing away the memory. By the time I got there, he went on, the car was already in the water. They did it clean. No obvious signs of violence. Everything looked like loss of control. That suited the county department just fine. An accident, case closed. We were silent for a minute. Outside, somewhere, a chain clinked. The wind moved the old gate. Why didn't you tell me? I finally asked. 1 year. A whole year, David. I lived thinking he just lost control of the wheel. Because we didn't know who else was involved, he replied heavily. If you'd known the truth, you would have started asking questions. You might have talked to Timothy, to Diana, to Wilkins, and then you would have been next. And now I'm not? I asked with a crooked smile. Now things have sped up, he said. They're not stalling anymore. Timothy and Diana are pressuring you, trying to get you to sell the land. Once the property goes to the right company, they can collapse the cave, destroy everything, and live comfortably off the money. Or an accident, I finished. An elderly woman alone, a big farm, stairs, a well. They're already consulting about guardianship, David nodded. We know that. As soon as you're declared incompetent, the guardian signs all the papers. Your signature won't even be needed. I remembered Diana's empty smile, her words about a care facility. What's best for everyone? Why don't you arrest them right now? I asked. If you have photos, surveillance, all of this? Because it's not enough, he said with a heavy sigh. We can put away a couple of runners, the guys hauling boxes, but not the organizers. We don't have direct proof. We need documents, recordings, the very materials Michael collected and hid. He managed to hide them, but we never found where. I remembered the folded scrap of paper. I took it out of my pocket and handed it to David. He left me this, I said. The truth is buried. Look. David read it and looked up at me. Where did you get this? From his phone, I replied, between the case and the body. And where did the phone come from? He asked. A woman brought it, I said. At a café. Gray hair in a bun, very strict dark coat. She knew my last name. Said I'd need it at night. Told me to answer at 11:15. David's face went pale. Janet, he said quietly. That was Janet Hogan. You said she was Michael's handler. She disappeared 3 days ago, he said. Stopped responding, shut off her service device, didn't show up at her address. We thought she'd been taken out. If she's bringing you the phone and notes, that means she's gone underground. And apparently, she no longer trusts not just local police, but even part of our own people. He ran a hand sharply through his hair. This is bad, he added. But on the other hand, it's good the phone ended up with you. Tell me one thing. The truth is buried. Was that a metaphor, or did he actually bury something? Judging by how he acted before, most likely literally. David nodded. Your husband was careful to the point of obsession. If he understood he was in danger, he could absolutely have buried everything somewhere only you would think to look. Where? I repeated softly. I closed my eyes. Fragments of the past floated up. Michael and I, young, hauling sacks of potatoes. He's laughing, saying he's not just burying potatoes, he's burying our future. Then, how we made a secret stash for the grandkids behind the barn. How he scolded me for keeping documents in an ordinary cabinet. And suddenly, I remembered. The roses, I whispered. What roses? My mother's rose garden, I said. Behind the house, on the east side. When she died, Michael and I planted a bush there in her memory. He even joked that the hole looked like one for buried treasure. David was already grabbing the flashlight from the bench. Let's go, he said. If Michael hid something, it's there. We hadn't even taken 2 steps when a car pulled into the yard. Then another. Headlights sliced across the house windows, brushed the barn wall, our faces. Damn it! David swore under his breath and yanked me back into the shadows. Someone's watching the property. I carefully peeked through a gap between the boards. Timothy's SUV had stopped by the gate. Behind it, a silver car belonging to Diana. A third one, a plain gray sedan, stood a little off to the side. When Wilkins stepped out of it, everything inside me dropped. Timothy, Diana, and the detective, I whispered. All 3. Then we're almost out of time, David said quietly, already pulling out his phone. I'm calling my people, but they'll be here in about 20 minutes. Outside, Timothy's voice rang out. Mom! Mom! We know you're not asleep. The light in your bedroom went off, and then we saw you walk toward the barn. Come out, let's talk. Diana added, sharper now. Christine, enough of these games. We really want to help you. Farther away, near the car, Wilkins was speaking too, but I couldn't make out the words. Blood was pounding in my ears. What now? I whispered. David glanced at me, then at his watch, then at the barn door. "Now, Christine," he said quietly, "you'll have to do something you may never have done in your life. Run from your own son to save him from prison, and yourself from the grave." He pressed the flashlight into my hands. Back exit of the barn. Rose garden. "I'll distract them. You dig. Whatever you find, you grab it and run to the road. Do you understand?" Outside, Timothy's familiar strained voice sounded again. "Mom, please, don't make us do something we don't want to do." And there I stood in the half-dark of the old barn, flashlight in my hand, Michael's note in my pocket. And I understood. Now I had to choose who to believe. The voice on the phone, a federal agent, and my dead husband, or my own son, who was suddenly speaking in a tone that made my fingers go cold. I stood in the dim barn with the cold flashlight in my hand, while outside my son was calling me with a voice usually used not for a mother, but for a troublesome old woman. David said softly, "Decide, Christine. Either you trust me, Janet, and your husband, or Timothy, Diana, and Wilkins. There may not be a second chance." My chest tightened. "What do I do?" I asked. "You know the back door of the barn?" "Of course." "Good." He pressed the flashlight into my palm. "Get out through the back, run to your mother's roses, dig by that bush. Whatever you find, grab it and run. Not to the house, not to the gate, but to the road. Take the old forest road, flag down any car, get to people. And you?" "I'll try to hold them here for now," he said shortly. "I am still on duty." Behind the wall, footsteps were already audible, car doors slammed. Timothy's voice came closer. "Moom! What kind of circus is this? Come out, stop this nonsense!" Diana added in her head doctor tone. "Christine, we're worried. Let's do this without hysterics." I took a breath and gripped the flashlight tighter. "All right," I said. "I'll try trusting the people who at least don't want to put me in a nursing home." David gave a brief nod, straightened instinctively, like he was back in front of his superiors. "As soon as you get out, don't look back," he said. "And for God's sake, if you hear gunshots, run anyway." He pushed me toward the back door and turned toward the front. I heard him step into the main aisle, heard the barn door open, and his voice rang out loud and steady. "Federal agent, nobody move. Hands where I can see them." "Who the hell are you?" Timothy exploded. "How dare you?" Diana began. But I didn't listen anymore. I slipped out through the back exit and ran toward the house. The night wrapped around me at once, cold, damp, breath turning to steam. The flashlight jumped in my hand, the beam darting over wet grass, the path, the ropes near the rose garden. Behind me came shouts, curses, heavy footsteps. What was happening between David, Timothy, Diana, and Wilkins? I didn't know and couldn't know then. I reached the small gate in the rose garden fence. My fingers were numb. The latch wouldn't budge, as if it had rusted solid overnight. "Oh, come on," I whispered and yanked harder. The gate finally gave way. I dropped to my knees in front of that very bush, my mother's, the one Michael and I planted so many years ago. The ground was hard, already cold, but the top layer could still be broken by hand. I started digging, with my nails, my knuckles, my whole palm. The soil crumbled, packed under my nails, my hands cramped with pain. Behind me came fast footsteps on the gravel. Timothy's voice. "Mom, what are you doing?" I didn't look back. I just dug harder. Suddenly my fingers hit something solid, plastic. I felt the edges and pulled a small plastic box wrapped in film out of the ground. At that moment, Timothy was already rushing toward me, breathing hard. "Mom, stop." I pressed the box to my chest, jumped up, and ran, not toward the house, but toward the forest. "Christine!" Diana was already shrieking from somewhere to the side. "You're only making this worse!" Behind me, several pairs of feet thundered at once. Branches whipped my face, my jacket caught on twigs, my heart was pounding somewhere up in my throat. I'd known this forest since childhood, its paths, ravines, the old dirt road that ran along the edge of our land. In the dark, everything felt unfamiliar, but my legs carried me on their own, toward the places where Michael and I used to pick mushrooms. Flashlights glowed behind me, their beams flickering between the trees, pulling first a trunk, then a bush out of the darkness. "Mom, stop!" Timothy shouted. "We just want to talk." I only pressed the box tighter to my chest and thought how right now he looked less like a son and more like someone you run from down back alleys. I burst out onto the forest road almost suddenly. One step, another, and under my feet was no longer soft ground, but a packed track, slick with moisture. And then, like in a movie, only this time I wasn't a viewer, about 20 meters ahead stood a car. Headlights on, engine running, passenger door wide open. "Get in!" a woman's voice shouted. Behind the wheel was the same woman from the café, Janet. I didn't think. I just sprinted to the car and threw myself inside, the box clutched in my hands. Janet hit the gas before I even slammed the door shut. In the rear window, I caught a glimpse of Timothy and Diana. They ran out onto the road, blinded by the headlights, froze for a second. Then they started waving, shouting something, but the car was already carrying us away. Janet drove in silence along the night road, staring straight ahead. Her face was pale and hard, dark circles under her eyes. About 10 minutes later, when my breathing had finally evened out a little, she asked shortly, "You've got the box?" "Yes," I said, hugging it closer. "Good. Then there's a chance." She handed me her phone. Some messaging app was open on the screen. A conversation. "Look," Janet said. At the top, Tim. Below, a message from an unknown number. "You have 24 hours to get the documents back and convince your mother to sell the land. If you don't make it, we cut all loose ends. That means her, the Fed, and everyone who knows about the operation. Choose family or prison." The message had a timestamp, just a couple of minutes ago. "See?" Janet said quietly. "They thought they had you in their hands." "Who are they?" I asked. "Later. Right now, the main thing is to take away their trump card." We drove to some roadside motel about 25 kilometers from the house. A plain place, peeling sign, yellow light in the windows, wrinkled curtains. If you pay cash, no one asks questions. We took a room on the ground floor. It was small, 2 beds, a table, an ancient TV on a stand. Janet set the box on the carpet in the middle of the room. We sat down next to it and just stared at it for a while. "Before we open it," she suddenly said, "you need to understand what you're getting into." "I'm already in it," I replied tiredly. "From the day Michael's car went into the lake." She nodded slightly. "Still, I'll say it. Once we see what he hid in there, there's no going back. Someone has already been killed over these papers. They won't stop for anyone else." "Michael was already killed," I said. "If I turn away now, it will mean I wasted 40 years of my life with this man." She didn't answer. She just pulled a folding knife from her bag, sliced through the thick plastic in one motion, and pried open the lid. Inside were 3 things: a small flash drive, a worn leather notebook, and an envelope with my name, Christine, written in Michael's handwriting. My throat tightened. I carefully picked up the envelope, as if it were made of glass. "I'll give you time," Janet said, already opening her laptop and plugging in the flash drive. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened the envelope, and unfolded the pages. "My beloved Christine, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm already gone, and you were stubborn and brave enough to find what I hid. Forgive me. Forgive me for the secrets, for the silence, for not telling you everything while I was alive. You and I always lived honestly with each other, and the fact that I broke that rule still weighs heavily on my heart. A year and a half ago, I realized that our son was doing something no normal father even wants to think about. I desperately wanted to be wrong. For a long time, I convinced myself that I was, but the facts were too obvious. He was using our land, our property, that very cave you may never have known about, as a transfer point for drugs. Shipments passed through it. For that, he was getting large sums of money. When I understood everything, I talked to him first. Timothy cried, swore he was in debt, that he saw no other way, that it would all end soon. He asked for time to get out. I believed him. Because he's my son. Because you and I raised him to be honest, and thought that's how it turned out. I gave him 2 months. During that time, there were 2 accidents. First, the brakes on my truck suddenly failed, right on a turn. If that day I'd been driving it instead of your car, you would be reading this letter already as a widow from a year ago. Then there was the so-called attempted break-in at our house, when you were with Sandra. I got back earlier than they expected and caught not burglars, but people very carefully searching my office, while leaving everything else almost untouched. That's when I realized Timothy wouldn't stop. Or rather, that someone was already guiding him by the hand. I went to the police. They listened very attentively, nodded, promised to check. And a couple of days later, very politely, very humanly, they hinted that it would be better for me not to stick my nose where it wasn't wanted. That's when I understood that this involved more than just boys with boxes in the woods. I was advised to go to the federal agents, to Janet and David. I hesitated for a long time, but there was no other path left. We started gathering evidence. I went out at night, followed cars, recorded conversations, photographed the people Timothy and Diana met with. We unraveled the chain all the way to people you're better off never knowing about. Almost everything is on this flash drive. Money movements, call recordings, messages, photos from the cave, license plates, faces, names. It's enough to put our son away for a very long time. But I want you to know this. He's not the only one to blame. If Timothy is weakness, then Diana is cold calculation. She's the one who connected him to the people behind this operation. Her connections, her clients. She pushed him further every time he tried to step back. Her firm serves people for whom the law is just paper. They have their people in the police and higher up. That's why I don't trust anyone locally, and possibly not everyone above them either. In the notebook are my notes, day by day, how I understood what was happening, what I did, where I went, who I saw. There's also a detailed description of the cave and all the passages I managed to find. What happens next is up to you. I know this will break your heart. I know how much you love our son. I know how you always found excuses for all his weaknesses. But I ask you one thing. This time, don't sacrifice yourself for him. Our boy grew up long ago and has been making his own choices for years. His choice was to betray the family, the memory of my father, your mother, and everything we built here for 40 years. You don't have to die for his mistakes. If Janet and David are with you, trust them. They're risking themselves, just like our parents' generation once did. I love you. I loved you all these years and will love you until your last breath. It hurts that I won't be able to grow old next to you, to welcome our grandchildren together, to finally go to that Ireland you dreamed about. But I believe in you. You always said you were weak. That's not true. Of all of us, you're the strongest. You just believed in yourself too rarely. Please survive. Please live not only for my memory, but for yourself too. Yours, Michael. P.S. On the same flash drive are the documents for a fund I managed to set up through a lawyer in New York. There's enough money there for you to either keep the farm or leave and live peacefully. Do whatever you want. Just remember, you don't owe anyone anything anymore. Not Timothy, not Diana, not their debts. I finished reading and realized the tears were flowing on their own, so much that the words began to blur. Janet silently handed me a tissue. He knew, I whispered. He knew Timothy would sell him out. He knew someone in the police was corrupt. He knew they'd try to get rid of me too, and he still went through with it. Because it was the right thing to do, Janet said softly, looking at the laptop screen. and because he was counting on you. On me? I looked at her in surprise. Yes, she nodded. He believed that if something happened to him, you would see it through to the end. She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen were folders, documents, spreadsheets. Christine, she said, what he collected isn't just evidence. It's a direct blow to some very serious people, and they know it. She clicked one of the files. Photos filled the screen. Faces, license plates, images from the cave, money transfer charts. They already killed your husband for this, Janet added. They'll try to get it back at any cost. I clutched Michael's letter in my hands, feeling something replace the emptiness inside. Heavy, solid. The fear was still there, but layered over it was anger, and a quiet, stubborn resolve. If this is the life I was given, I wasn't going to give it up easily. Janet looked at the screen, then at the clock in the corner, and suddenly went even paler. There's just one problem, she said softly. One person doesn't have time anymore. And if we do nothing, he'll be the first to pay. She stared at the laptop, numbers, photos, diagrams, then glanced again at the clock and visibly tensed. We're almost out of time, she said quietly, and it looks like you won't be the first one to pay. What do you mean? I squeezed Michael's letter so hard the paper crumpled. Who are you talking about? Her phone on the table vibrated. She glanced at the screen and let out a sharp breath. David. She put it on speaker. Janet. His voice sounded strained, angry, exhausted. I'm at Wilkins's department, officially, for a talk, unofficially, until I refuse one time too many. Are you okay? She asked quickly. Relatively, he snorted. Broken arm, took a couple hits to the ribs, but I'm alive. Listen carefully. There's not much time. He coughed, then went on. Timothy and Diana aren't the main problem. There's a man behind them, Victor Cross. It's his operation, his people, and he's not waiting. Something inside me went cold. What do you mean not waiting? I asked. It means the so-called 24 hours are a smokescreen, David said. Tonight they're heading to Sandra. They think you might have sent her the documents or gone to her yourself. They have the address and connections in Chicago. If they don't find anything there... He didn't finish, but I understood. They'll hurt Sandy, I whispered. If we don't stop them, yes, he said. I was told directly, until you return the documents and agree to sell the land, the pressure will only increase. We'll hide Sandra, Janet said quickly. I'll contact... You can hide her all you want, David cut in. But as long as Cross has the cave, the product, and people inside law enforcement, he'll always be one step ahead. Either we break the whole system, or you spend the rest of your life running. Then, more quietly, Janet, they're not letting me out of here until they get what they want, so think fast. The line went dead. For a minute, we just sat there in that cheap motel room. Me, with Michael's letter in my hands. Janet, with a phone that had just carried the voice of a man with a broken arm. And somewhere far away in Chicago, my dear Sandy had no idea what was coming. We have to warn her immediately, Janet said first. Send people, hide her, move her, anywhere, even to friends in the countryside. And then what? I asked. We hide Sandy, they go after someone else. They squeeze David, try to put me under guardianship or dump me in a hole. They take the land and collapse the cave. Janet pressed her lips together. So what do you suggest? I put the letter on the bed and picked up Michael's notebook. I flipped to the middle, where he had drawn a map of the tunnels under our field. Here, I tapped the page. An auxiliary tunnel. See the note? Emergency exit. Leads to the old Peterson farm. They don't know about it. Janet leaned closer. Where is that? Beyond the tree line, I said. There used to be the Peterson farm there. Now it's abandoned. Just the foundation and a barn left. If a team comes in from the village side, you can't see it from here. I looked up. Janet, how many people can you bring tonight? If I call one person I trust in the New York office. She thought for a moment. Maybe 6, 8 at most. But that's not much against Cross. We don't need to fight an army, I said. We need to grab the ones who come to my house to threaten and blackmail me. Timothy, Diana, Wilkins, and a couple of their muscle. Your people can follow the chain afterward. She studied me, as if checking whether I was about to break down. You understand what you're risking? Sandy, myself, the land, Michael's memory, everything. I nodded. But we're already risking all of it anyway. I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Janet swore quietly. All right, she said. Here's the plan. I call New York. You get ready to play the role of a compliant old woman who agreed to return the documents. She went to the window and dialed. I only caught fragments. No, I don't trust local. Yes, a leak. Minimum 8 people. Entry from the old Peterson property. She records everything, audio included. Yes, I take responsibility. About 10 minutes later, she came back. The team will be on the old forest road near Peterson in 2 hours, she said. I'll meet them, guide them to the secondary cave entrance, place people around the house, the barn, and the exit. And me? You go back home, she answered, in a way that makes sure they know you're there. Alone? Not exactly. She glanced at the flash drive. I'm encrypting and sending a copy of the files to New York right now. We'll keep the original with us. You'll say everything is already with the feds, and honestly, that'll be almost true. I gave a bitter smile. If someone had told me a year ago that at 64 I'd be part of something like this, I'd have thought they'd lost their mind. People like you are often underestimated, Janet replied calmly. That's our biggest advantage. I was driving back home closer to nightfall. The road felt different, as if in one day it had aged 10 years along with me. Janet and I split up earlier. She turned toward the old Peterson property. I took my usual turn, parked by the gate like always. Outside, everything was quiet. I didn't see any unfamiliar cars nearby, but that meant little. Cross's people weren't stupid enough to show themselves. Inside, only the kitchen light was on. I went in, took off my jacket, hung it on the hook, gave myself a minute just to stand in the hallway and listen to my breathing. Then I walked into the kitchen. He was already there. Timothy was sitting at the table, elbows on the countertop, hands clasped, head lowered. When I came in, he looked up, and I saw not just my son, but a man whose ground had been ripped out from under him in a single week. Mom, he said, barely getting the word out. Thank God you're alive. Diana stood by the window, perfectly composed, polished, like in a courtroom before a major hearing, a suit, flawless hair, phone in hand. She wasn't smiling, just watching closely. By the wall, leaning against the fridge, was Wilkins, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed on the surface, but his eyes kept darting, measuring everything. Next to him were 2 solid-looking men I'd never seen before. Stone faces, the kind nothing seems to surprise. Well, hello, Mom. One of them smirked slightly. Had a nice ride? I felt something inside me rear up, but I forced my voice to stay calm. I did. Now let's talk about why you're in my house in the middle of the night. Mom, Timothy rushed in. This is all simple, Tim, stop. Diana cut him off. Her voice was even, slightly tired. Christine, we all have the same goal. Do we? I rested my palm on the back of a chair. And what would that be? To make sure you live out your old age in peace, she said flatly. You don't fully understand what Michael dragged you into with his contacts. And you're the one who's going to explain what he was involved in? I asked. I'd love to hear it. Your husband got mixed up with very dangerous people. Wilkins stepped in. He stuck his nose where a simple farmer had no business going. We tried to close it as an accident so the family wouldn't be touched. And now it seems you've decided to repeat his mistakes. I looked straight at him. And I thought you just got paid very well in cash for that closure." His cheek twitched, but he stayed silent. Diana, meanwhile, stepped closer to the table. "Let's stop going in circles," she said. "We need the documents Michael hid, the flash drive, recordings, whatever else there is. In return, you get peace, safety, and a decent place in the city. And the land? The land will go to people who can use it more efficiently," she replied calmly. "It's too much for you now." "You mean Summit Holdings and Friends?" I clarified. Something wary flickered in one of the stranger's eyes. "How do you know that name?" he asked. "I know a lot of things," I said. "I know my husband was working with federal agents. I know his car ended up in the lake not because of nature, but because another car forced it there. I know someone in local law enforcement sold his conscience." I turned my gaze to Wilkins. "And I strongly suspect that someone is standing by my refrigerator right now." "You're delusional," he said coldly. "You need a psychiatric evaluation." "That's what you had planned for me," I nodded. "Guardianship, a nursing home, maybe an accident by the well, all legal, right?" "Christine," Diana's voice sharpened, "you're interfering with our attempts to help you." "No," I said. "I'm interfering with finishing what you started with Michael." A heavy silence settled over the room. One of the big men pushed off the wall and took a few steps toward me. "Enough talk," he growled. "Where are the documents?" I slowly took my regular phone out of my pocket and placed it on the table without letting go. "See this?" I asked. "It's been recording since the moment I walked in." "So what?" Wilkins snapped. "So everything you're saying right now isn't just between us anymore," I replied. "I like paperwork and recordings, just like Michael." I turned to Timothy. "And that kitchen conversation 3 days ago, when Diana explained to you that Dad would have to be taken out or we'd all go to prison, that's safely stored too." He flinched like he'd been hit. "How do you—" "Oh, give it a rest," one of the men near the fridge cut in. "Fairy tales about recordings and flash drives. If the feds had anything, we'd already know." "That's where you're wrong," I said calmly. "The flash drive is already with people you don't control. Everything you worked so hard to hide is already on its way to New York." It was a half-truth, but it sounded convincing. "Then we don't need you anymore," one of them said, and moved closer. "Touch her, and you'll be on camera," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Janet stood in the kitchen entrance, a gun in her hands, looking so cold it made even me shiver. "Federal agents," she said loudly. "Everyone, hands on the table, face down. There are people outside too." Behind her, I saw shadows in the hallway. Wilkins lunged toward his holster. One of the big men cursed and reached for his pocket. Diana went pale, dark circles under her eyes suddenly visible. Timothy froze like a trapped animal. "You've lost your mind," Wilkins hissed. "You don't have a warrant, you don't—" At that moment, something clicked in the house, and the lights went out. That was part of the plan. Janet had warned me. Once it reached the breaking point, her people would cut the power. The kitchen plunged into thick darkness. Someone knocked over a chair. It crashed loudly. Someone cursed. A door slammed. A sharp shout rang out. "Weapon on the floor! Nobody move!" As agreed, I simply dropped to the floor and, feeling the tiles with my hands, crawled toward the hallway, counting steps the way I once counted running to the barn for a jar of jam. 1, 2, 3. A gunshot cracked behind me. A muffled groan. Someone fell, hitting the table. 4, 5, 6. I clawed at the floor, felt crumbs and some spilled liquid under my palms, and thought only one thing: get to the back door before it's decided who really owns this house. Us, or the people who decided to bury the truth along with us. The hallway was so dark, I crawled almost blind. My knees slid on the linoleum, my hands caught on anything they could. Somewhere behind me came another crash. Someone shouted, "Down!" followed by swearing and another yell. I counted to the right door, found the cold handle, yanked it open, and spilled out onto the back porch. The night hit me hard, cold, damp, the smell of wet earth. Something strange was already happening in the yard. Out of the darkness, from the garden and the forest side, people in dark uniforms emerged, with flashlights and weapons. Beams cut across the walls, the barn, the windows. I pressed myself against the house, staying in the shadows. My heart was pounding like someone was punching me from the inside. "Christine!" a clear voice called out. "It's over. You can come out." It was Janet. I walked around the corner of the house and stepped onto the porch. The lights were back on. Someone had reached the breaker panel. The scene was almost unreal. Through the open kitchen door, I could see Wilkins on the floor, face down, hands cuffed behind his back. One of the big men lay nearby, already restrained. The other stood against the wall at gunpoint, slowly lowering his hands. Diana sat on a chair, hands behind her back. There was no fear on her face, only cold, furious anger. She was still trying to argue with a man in uniform. "You've exceeded your authority. Your lawyer can wait," a young federal agent replied dryly. And then there was Timothy. Timothy was sitting on the couch in the living room, hands raised, fingers shaking. His face was gray, his eyes red. I stood in the doorway, looking at all of it, and realized that in my small country kitchen, one long story was ending, and another was beginning at the same time. Janet came up to me and lightly touched my elbow. "David is alive," she said quietly. "He's in the hospital. His arm is in a cast, a couple of cracked ribs, but he'll be fine." I just nodded. "Be careful," she added. "They might try to play on your sympathy." I already knew that. I stepped closer to the living room. 2 federal agents shifted aside to let me pass. Timothy looked up. There was everything in his eyes at once, fear, guilt, and some kind of childish hope. "Mom," his voice broke. "Mom, Don't call me that," I said calmly. "Right now you're not acting like a son, but like a stranger. Let's talk honestly." He swallowed, glanced at Janet, at the armed agents, then back at me. "I didn't want this," he began. "Honestly, I didn't want Dad to, but you didn't stop it," I finished for him. He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. I got into debt," he said quickly, stumbling over the words. "Diana said there was a way to fix everything. Just help a little with the land, let people move things through the cave. She swore it was temporary, just logistics, that no one would get hurt." He shook his head. And then it all spiraled. It wasn't just about money anymore. Those people showed up, Mom. I realized there was no way back, and if I tried to get out, they'd destroy us. "And instead of coming to your father and mother, you went to those people," I said. "I went to Dad," he snapped. "I told him everything. He said he'd turn me in, that he wouldn't cover for me. He said I'd made my choice." For a second, his voice carried a note of resentment, like a teenager's. "And Diana said," he went on more quietly, "that then we'd both go to prison, that those people had their own connections up there, that if Dad started digging, they'd take everyone out. First him, then you, then me." He closed his eyes. "I didn't give the order to kill him," he whispered. "But I didn't stop it either. Do you understand?" I turned away. I pretended I didn't see where it was going. I looked at him and felt something inside me finally crack for good. "You've always liked the easy way out," I said softly, "even when someone else had to pay for it." He sobbed. "Mom, I'm going to prison. I know that. I'll sign everything. Just tell me you might forgive me someday." I thought for a second. Not for effect. Truly. Images flashed through my mind. Him as a little boy with a wooden tractor in the yard, a teenager with a backpack, a grown man laughing at our anniversary. And then, his car in the lake, the empty coffin, Michael's letter saying plainly that Timothy had tried to get rid of me. "Timothy," I said at last. Right now, I can't promise you that." He froze, as if I'd struck him. "But I can tell you something else," I went on. "Your father, even knowing you betrayed him, still left you a chance. Not an excuse, not protection, a chance. If you tell the truth, if you help put them all away, you'll still have some piece of life left to live differently." I took a breath. As for forgiveness, I don't know. Maybe someday, maybe never. But the chance to become someone else is still there. Whether you take it is your choice. He lowered his head. I'll try," he whispered. "That's all I expect from you," I said. I turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Timothy." He flinched. "Mom, wait." But I was already leaving the living room. Janet was waiting for me on the porch. The night was cold again, but no longer so heavy. People moved around the yard, checking lists, radios crackling, black vans with barred windows rolling over the gravel. "David said he's proud of you," she told me, "and that Michael would be proud too." "Michael would be devastated," I replied quietly. "But yes, probably. He'd be glad it finally ended." She nodded. "The important thing is, you're alive. The land didn't end up in their hands. We'll secure the cave as evidence. Cross and his people won't get out of this." I watched as Wilkins was led away. No badge, no swagger, just a man in handcuffs with no one left to protect him. As Diana, still smooth and perfect, walked to the car, posture intact even now, hissing something into her lawyer's phone. As the two others were taken away in silence, eyes down. And as Timothy, wearing the jacket I'd once bought him myself, was put into a federal vehicle. He looked back once, searching for me. I didn't go to him. I just stood on the porch and watched the door slam shut behind him. 3 months passed. Winter did its work. The field lay under snow, the house creaked in the frost, but breathing felt easier now. Not because of the weather, because the worst was over. That day I was standing by the northern field, near the place where the cave entrance had been. Everything there was dug up now, temporary fencing set, machinery everywhere. Workers in helmets and vests were finishing up. David walked over to me, supporting his not quite recovered shoulder. His arm had healed by then, but he still favored it. "That's it, Christine," he said. "Last day. Tomorrow they'll seal the entrance completely and cover it over." "Thank God," I replied. "I don't want anyone turning storage facilities under my garden ever again." He smiled. "We got so much material from that cave that more than one court will be busy," he said. "Latest count, over 40 people charged in the Cross case, 3 counties, several major cities. And Wilkins pleaded guilty to corruption," David added. "He's bargaining for time, but he's unlikely to get less than 10 years. And that's just the first charge. Investigations are still ongoing." He paused, then said, "And thanks to Michael. Without his thoroughness, we would have missed half the connections. He was a very careful man." "He always was," I said. "Even his nails were sorted into jars." We stood there in silence. The workers finally sealed the entrance. The machines roared, leveling the ground. I thought that in spring I should plant something living there, grass, flowers, so that instead of a hole where poison once passed, there would be something normal. When I got back home, a stack of letters was already waiting on the kitchen table. Sandra was stirring something in a large pot, her signature stew that smelled like home, not a special operation. Sandra had moved in with me almost immediately after everything happened. She said she needed a change of scenery, but we both knew she just didn't want me rattling around this place alone. The mail came. She nodded toward the envelopes. "Looks like something official." I wiped my hands, sat down at the table, and started sorting through the mail. The top envelope was from Janet, a short note saying who had been awarded, who had been transferred, who promoted. At the end, she added, "Michael would be satisfied." The second was from the local historical society. They wanted to write about our land as an old family farm and asked for permission to come in spring to film. I smiled. A year ago, no one even knew we existed, except a couple of neighbors and the tax office. The third envelope was thick, with the prosecutor's seal. My stomach tightened unpleasantly. Envelopes like that rarely bring anything good for the soul. I slid it open and pulled out a neat stack of papers. Everything was businesslike. Numbered sections, references to statutes, stamps. In dry legal language, it stated that Timothy Smith had entered a plea agreement, admitted guilt on part of the charges, agreed to testify against other defendants, including Diana and Cross himself, and in exchange, the prosecution would ask for a reduced sentence. Instead of more than 20 years, 12, with the possibility of parole in about 8. Attached was a small handwritten note from his lawyer. "Dear Mrs. Smith, your son asked me to tell you that he does not expect letters, visits, or forgiveness from you, but he wants you to know that he realizes every day what he has done and deeply regrets the pain he caused you. How you choose to live with this is up to you. Respectfully." I reread both pages, folded them carefully, and held the envelope in my hands for a while, as if it were hot. "Well?" Sandra asked cautiously, covering the pot with a lid. "What does it say?" "They say Timothy agreed to talk," I replied. "He'll get less time if he doesn't change his mind. Do you feel better?" I thought about it. "I don't know," I said honestly. Sandra was quiet for a moment, then asked what I myself was afraid to ask. "Will you go see him?" I looked at the envelope, then at the window, at the field, and that same forest where I had run with that damn box like in someone else's movie. And suddenly I realized the answer was already inside me. Saying it out loud, though, felt like signing off on a new chapter of my life. I took a breath, not knowing what exactly would come out of my mouth. I looked out the window again, at the field and the forest, and only then answered Sandy. "Not now." She nodded silently and didn't press. "Maybe someday," I added more quietly, "if I find the strength." I didn't find that strength until May. It was a warm day, rare for our area. Sun, a light breeze, dry roads. I drove to the prison in 3 hours, the whole time wondering if I should just turn back. They took me to the visiting room by the book. Metal detector, passport, paperwork. I sat at the table and placed my hands in front of me so no one would see them shaking. When Timothy was brought in, I didn't recognize him at first. Thinner, drawn, gray in his hair, new lines in his face. My 42-year-old boy had turned into a man life had caught up with fast and brutally. "Mom." He gave a crooked smile. "You really came?" "I did," I said. We were silent. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly. "And I'm not asking. I know some things probably can't be forgiven." He clasped his hands together. "I just want you to know that I think about what I did every day. About Dad. About you. About how everything could have been different if I'd opened my mouth back then, instead of sticking my head in the sand. You know," I said slowly, "it's good that you think about it. Guilt, in your case, is a very appropriate feeling." He blinked, but didn't argue. "Prison isn't the worst punishment," I went on. "Worse is living with the knowledge that your father didn't die for nothing, but because you didn't say stop in time." "I understand," he whispered. "Then live with it," I nodded. "And work, not for me, not for a shorter sentence. Work so that whatever life you have left is at least worthy of what you've already done." We sat a little longer. He told me he'd agreed to testify, that he was writing letters to a psychologist, that he was trying to stay out of trouble inside. Listening to him, I kept thinking how strange it was that we were talking about this, not in a kitchen, not in a field, but in a room with bars and guards. "Will you ever forgive me?" he finally asked. I didn't play the kind mother. "I don't know, Timothy," I answered honestly. Maybe in years, maybe never. He swallowed. But do you know what I can give you? I added. What? Hope. He looked up. If you really work on yourself, really tell the truth, and don't hide behind anyone, you'll still have a chance to get out and live the rest of your life differently. And if many years from now you still want to, we can try to talk like people, not like defendant and victim. I'll try, he said quietly. I promise. That's the only thing I expect from you, I said, standing up. Not pretty words. Work on yourself. I left first. I cried for half the drive home, but I didn't turn back. After that, I didn't visit him again. Maybe someday I will, maybe one time was enough. Time will tell. Diana was sentenced to 22 years, no parole. She held herself to the end like she was in court, arguing, filing motions, trying to pressure through connections. It didn't help. When I was told about the verdict, I felt neither joy nor satisfaction, just fatigue. A person chose how to live. Now she would live with that choice. The cross case spread wide. He himself was eventually pulled out of another country through international channels and is now in prison as well, not only in our country. Several agencies went through his operation. Badges, chairs, and stars flew. It didn't make me feel better or worse. It just gave me the sense that Michael hadn't risked everything for nothing. When the main trials ended, sometime in midsummer, a lawyer came to see me, the same one Michael had worked with through New York. He rented a small office in the county center, but this time he insisted on meeting at my house. He said it was only fair. When it's about your life, you should talk where you live. I sat him down in the kitchen and took out cups. A man in his 50s, glasses, neat, no airs, but clearly serious about paperwork. Christine, he began, opening a thick folder. Your husband was not only my client, but, if I may say so, became a friend over time. I nodded. 6 months before his death, he changed his will, the lawyer continued, and set up a trust. He spread several documents in front of me. Michael carefully sold off some assets, he explained. Nothing illegal, old investments, shares, stakes. He converted part of the property into cash and placed it in this trust. The amount is substantial, believe me. I listened and thought how little I had really known about the financial side of what my husband did. The trust is in your name, he said. You are the sole beneficiary. The money can be used for anything: maintaining the farm, medical care, travel, education, no strict limitations. And Timothy? I asked. It's written in the will. The lawyer slid another page toward me. That in the event of suspicious circumstances surrounding Michael's death, the son is disinherited. Everything goes to you. If something happens to you first, the right passes to your sister, Sandra. I stared silently at the neatly printed lines. Michael had thought of everything. He understood who he might need to protect me from. He knew, was all I said. He suspected, the lawyer corrected gently. Knowing your family dynamic, he understood that you would carry everything on your own to the very end, just to make things easier for your child. So he made sure you had leverage of your own. He paused and took out another envelope. And this is the final letter, he said. Michael left instructions to give it to you only after the main court proceedings were completed. The envelope was thick. The paper was familiar. The handwriting, too. I thanked the lawyer, walked him to the door, returned to Michael's study, sat down in his old chair, which still smelled faintly of wood and tobacco, and only then opened the letter. My dear Christine, if you are reading these lines, it means the hardest part is already behind you. You know the truth about Timothy, about the land, about everything I got myself into. I can only imagine how much pain and emptiness you are feeling right now. I won't apologize again for hiding part of the truth from you. You've already read my first letter and know how I feel about that. What I want to say now is something else. This is not the end of your life. Yes, we lived together for 40 years. Yes, we had a son, a farm, responsibilities. Yes, all of it collapsed in a way I could never have imagined. But you are still here. You always put yourself last. First your parents, then me, then the child, then the farm. You spent your whole life living for someone else. That time is over. I created the fund the lawyer told you about for exactly this reason, so you would have freedom. The freedom to leave the farm and live in the city. The freedom to leave the city and live in the countryside. The freedom to travel, to learn, to try the things you used to talk about in a whisper when you thought I was already asleep. Do you remember Ireland? You showed me pictures of green hills and said you wanted to walk there, sit in a small pub, listen to live music. I brushed it off back then. No time, the farm, the cows, planting season. Now you have time. In the trust documents, there's one small detail, a paid but undated ticket to Dublin. When you feel ready, go. For both of us. If you want, keep the farm. Rent it out, sell it, delegate it. Or on the contrary, develop it, hire people, turn it into something new. The only thing I truly ask is this. Don't live on autopilot or out of duty. Live the way you want. You are stronger than you think. You've already proven it. You made it through my death, through your son's betrayal, through the pressure of people who are used to crushing others, and you didn't break. From here on, it's your path. I believe in you. Always yours, Michael. P.S. And yes, if someday you decide to give Timothy a second chance, that will be your decision alone. From the other side, I have no right to influence it. I sat in his study with the letter in my hands, and this time I wasn't sobbing the way I had before. There were tears, of course, but alongside the pain, there was something else. As if I had finally been given permission to live not only the right way, but the way I wanted. Spring came late that year, but I greeted it as a different person. Sandy and I decided not to sell the land. On the contrary, we hired a young couple, Mark and Olivia. Newly married, full of ideas about eco-farming, artisanal products, and other trendy things I barely understood, but I could see they weren't afraid of hard work or getting their hands dirty. We settled them in the old house near the northern field. Michael's parents had once lived there. Later, it stood empty. Mark and Olivia renovated it over the summer, installed windows themselves, fixed the roof. We set aside 10 acres for vegetables, built greenhouses, got chickens, a couple of goats, and one calm cow. Put up a small stand by the highway. People started coming for milk, eggs, greens. The farm wasn't the same as it had been with Michael, and it didn't need to be. Life rarely goes back to the way it was. More often, it goes forward differently. Sandra took over the kitchen and paperwork. I handled organization and talking to people. The young ones did everything that required strength and a solid back. Some evenings we sat in the yard drinking tea, and it felt like my youth again, only without illusions and with a different kind of experience. In August, I finally used the ticket to Dublin. Sandy went with me, saying she wasn't about to let me wander around foreign countries alone at my age. I laughed, but I was grateful. For 3 weeks we walked through green hills, sat in small cafes, listened to musicians, looked at the ocean. In every beautiful place, I spoke to Michael in my head, telling him what I saw, what I felt, where we were going next. There were no signs from above, no voices from the sky. Just a simple human feeling, remembering the person you loved, not only through pain, but through joy. And that, perhaps, is what real memory is. When I came home, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of the word future. Yes, my son is in prison. My husband is in the ground. I carry many scars inside, but I have a home, land, people around me, and the feeling that I can still do something, not just wait for my days to run out. I marked the year after that blue box on my porch. Autumn came again, bright as ever. Yellow leaves, cool air, the smell of smoke. It all looked very much like that day in the café. Only now, instead of emptiness inside, there was a calm, heavy, steady feeling. Michael's phone lay turned off in a desk drawer. It had done its job. Sandra came out onto the porch with 2 mugs of tea and handed one to me. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how strangely life twists," I replied. "A year ago, I was sure it was all over. That all that was left was to endure and endure until there was nothing left of me." I looked at the field, the new garden, the house where the young ones were busy in the kitchen, the smoke from the chimney. And now I realize that, apparently, my second life has begun, I said. Later than most, but mine. Sandy smiled. Michael would be proud. Michael would grumble that I got to Ireland too late, I snorted. But yes, I think he would be proud. We sat in silence, each with our own thoughts. I didn't become a saint. I didn't become a heroic mother who forgave everything. No. My son is where he belongs. Have I fully forgiven him? No. But I've learned to live without turning that pain into the center of the universe. If there's a simple moral to this whole story, it's this. The truth always comes out. The only question is which side you're on when it does. I ended up on the side that's hard and frightening, but where you can still look yourself in the mirror afterward. At 65, I suddenly understood that I'm not some fragile old woman who needs to be saved from herself. I'm a person who took a blow from her own family and didn't turn into a bitter knot of anger. And that, perhaps, is the most important thing Michael gave me, with his letter, his death, and this whole story. The right to keep living with my head held high. And you, honestly, which side would you choose if you had to decide between someone you love and the truth? Think about it and write what you would do. I'd truly like to read it.